At 75, rock legend Suzi Quatro is finally opening up about her long-rumored connection with Chris Norman, the frontman of Smokey. For decades, fans have whispered about the undeniable chemistry between the two, especially after their unforgettable duet "Stumbling In" became a worldwide hit in 1978. The song wasn't just a musical success. It felt like a confession wrapped in melody. Every glance, every lyric, every smile shared between them on stage seemed to hint at something much deeper than friendship. But behind the scenes, both Suzi and Chris were at the height of fame, living under the scrutiny of fans, tabloids, and record labels. While the world speculated about a secret romance, Suzi kept silent, always diverting attention to her music. Yet now, at 75, she's breaking that silence. And what she has revealed is more emotional and more shocking than anyone expected. Suzi admits that her connection with Chris went far beyond music, describing it as a meeting of souls that never truly ended. However, fame, touring schedules, and personal commitments tore them apart before they could explore what might have been. "We were fire and gasoline," she says softly. Perfect on stage, but impossible off it. For the first time, Suzi also shares the pain of watching Chris move on, the regret of not taking a chance, and how that chapter influenced every love song she's written since. Fans who thought they knew the story are now realizing the truth. "Stumbling In" wasn't just a duet. It was a reflection of two hearts that found each other too late. Long before Suzi Quatro and Chris Norman joined forces to record one of the most beloved duets of the 1970s, both were already stars in their own right. Suzi was the fierce, leather-clad rock and roll queen who shattered gender barriers in a male-dominated industry. She wasn't just a singer. She was a force of nature, known for her bass guitar, rebellious spirit, and stage presence that commanded every crowd. Meanwhile, Chris Norman, the soft-spoken frontman of Smokey, had a voice that defined the smooth, heartfelt rock sound of the decade. When their paths crossed, no one could have predicted that their collaboration would create musical history. The story began in 1978 at a party in Düsseldorf, Germany. Suzi Quatro and Chris Norman were attending the same gathering with producer Mike Chapman, the man behind countless chart-topping hits of the time. In the middle of the evening, Chapman noticed an undeniable spark between Suzi and Chris as they casually sang together for fun. Their voices blended perfectly, her raspy power and his smooth tone melting into something rare and electric. Chapman immediately recognized the potential. The next morning, he told Suzi, "You and Chris are going to record a duet." At first, she laughed it off, but soon after, "Stumbling In" was born, a song that would change both of their lives forever. When the duet hit the airwaves, it was instant magic. Released in late 1978, "Stumbling In" quickly climbed the charts around the world, reaching the top 5 in the United States and earning gold certification. The song's message, two people caught up in a love they never planned, resonated deeply with listeners. Fans couldn't help but wonder if the lyrics reflected real feelings between the two singers. Their undeniable chemistry on stage only fueled the rumors. For years, people speculated that Suzi and Chris shared more than just a song. They seemed too connected, too natural together for it to be purely professional. But Suzi has always been careful when talking about Chris Norman. In interviews, she described him not as a lover but as a deep friend, someone who brought balance and calm to her fiery personality. She once referred to him as a father figure and admitted, "He's very much missed." Her words carry a weight that suggests emotional closeness, even if it wasn't romantic in the way fans imagined. Behind the success of "Stumbling In" was mutual respect and admiration. Chris Norman once said that Suzi's energy in the studio was contagious, pushing him to perform with more emotion than ever before. Meanwhile, Suzi admitted that Chris had a unique gentleness that made recording feel effortless. "There was no ego," she explained. "It was just about the music." The song became a defining moment for both artists. For Suzi Quatro, it marked her crossover into mainstream pop success in the U.S., a feat few female rockers of her era achieved. For Chris Norman, it helped him transition from being the frontman of a band to being recognized as an artist in his own right. Their collaboration was lightning in a bottle, something even Suzi later said couldn't be replicated. Yet beneath all the success, something more personal remained, a friendship built on trust, shared passion, and the unspoken bond that only musicians truly understand. While many duets fade into history, Stumblin' In has remained timeless, not just because of its melody, but because of the connection behind it. Suzi Quatro, now in her 70s, still looks back on that chapter with fondness. "It was one of those perfect moments," she once said, "where everything just clicked. The music, the people, the feeling. It's rare, and it stays with you forever." It was the start of something unforgettable, a partnership that touched millions, and a story that, even after 4 decades, still leaves fans wondering what truly happened between Suzi Quatro and Chris Norman. As Stumblin' In continued to dominate charts around the world, the undeniable chemistry between Suzi Quatro and Chris Norman became one of the most talked-about subjects in pop culture. Every time they appeared together, whether on stage, on television, or in interviews, fans could feel the spark. Their body language, the way they smiled at each other, the easy laughter that flowed between them, it all felt too natural to be rehearsed. The duet wasn't just a hit. It was a story of connection that millions believed went beyond music. For Suzi Quatro, who had built her image as a tough, independent rock star, this softer side surprised everyone. Her leather jumpsuits, roaring bass lines, and rebellious attitude had defined her career. But with Chris Norman, audiences saw another layer: warmth, vulnerability, and something almost tender. On the other side, Chris Norman, the soft-spoken, smoky frontman, seemed to come alive around Suzi. He wasn't just the mellow singer behind romantic ballads anymore. With her, he looked energized, spontaneous, and deeply present. Rumors quickly began to swirl. Fans speculated that their on-stage connection reflected a real-life romance. Magazine headlines hinted at a secret relationship. And even years later, people still ask Suzi about what really happened between her and Chris. But she's always remained composed when addressing those questions. "We were two professionals who respected each other deeply," she once said. "That song worked because we believed in it, not because of what people thought was happening between us." Still, Suzi's own words often leave room for interpretation. In one interview, she admitted that she and Chris shared a very special bond, something that couldn't easily be explained. "When you sing with someone and it just clicks," she said, "there's a connection that goes beyond friendship or romance. It's something in the soul." Those kinds of statements only fueled more fascination among fans who believed there was more to the story. Behind the scenes, Suzi and Chris spent long hours in recording studios, interviews, and rehearsals. They became close friends, sharing laughs, memories, and sometimes deep conversations about the pressures of fame. Both were married at the time, which added to the intrigue. But according to Suzi, their relationship was built on mutual trust and shared artistic passion, not scandal. "We never crossed that line," she once said. It wasn't about that. It was about the music. Even so, it's easy to understand why the world became obsessed with the idea of Suzi and Chris as more than duet partners. Their voices fit together like two halves of a story, his soft and emotional, hers bold and commanding. Together, they created something that felt romantic even when it wasn't. For Chris Norman, Stumblin' In was a career-defining moment, too. It brought him international fame outside of Smokey and showed a new side of his artistry. He often spoke fondly of Suzi, calling her a true professional and one of the most passionate performers he'd ever worked with. Their mutual admiration never faded, even as time and distance separated them. As the years went by, fans continued to hope for another collaboration, another duet that could recreate that same lightning-in-a-bottle moment. But Suzi Quatro often said that Stumblin' In was special precisely because it was never planned. "You can't force magic," she said. "That song came out of a spontaneous moment, and that's why it worked." Today, looking back, Suzi acknowledges how important that connection was to her career, not just musically, but personally. Chris was someone who reminded me to slow down and enjoy what I was doing, she reflected. He had this calming energy. I was always running 1,000 miles an hour, but he had this way of grounding me. It was a friendship that defied definition. Not quite romantic, not quite ordinary, but something real and deeply felt. And for Suzi Quatro, even decades later, the memory of that partnership remains one of the most meaningful moments of her life. As the 1980s rolled in, the world of music began to change. Suzi Quatro moved forward with her solo career, while Chris Norman continued his journey both as part of Smokey and later as a solo artist. Their paths, once intertwined by the magic of Stumblin' In, slowly began to drift apart. The fast-paced nature of the industry, constant touring, and personal commitments left little time for collaboration. But even though they went their separate ways professionally, neither ever forgot the impact of what they had shared. For Suzi, that moment in 1978 was a turning point, not just commercially, but emotionally. "You don't always know when you're living through something iconic," she once said. But looking back, Stumblin' In was one of those moments. Whenever fans brought up Chris Norman, she couldn't help but smile. It wasn't a smile of regret or longing, but one of fondness, a sign that the memories were still warm. In later interviews, Suzi described how rare it was to find another artist she connected with so naturally. Chris had a calmness about him, she recalled. "I could be fiery, intense, that's just who I am." But he balanced that. He brought out a gentler side of me. That balance, she said, was what made their duet so timeless. While others saw romance, Suzi saw harmony, not just in the music, but in their energies. Chris Norman, too, never downplayed what Stumblin' In meant to him. He once admitted that he didn't expect the song to become as huge as it did. "It was just a fun thing at first," he said. But it turned into something people would never forget. He spoke about how Suzi's energy brought something new out of him, pushing him to perform with more heart than ever. "She had that spark," he said. "You couldn't help but feel it when she was around." Over the years, fans often wondered why Suzi and Chris never reunited for another duet. Offers were made, rumors circulated, but it never happened. Suzi explained it simply. Some things are best left as they were. Perfect. She believed that trying to recreate Stumblin' In would only take away from its magic. "You can't fake that kind of chemistry," she said. "It happens once, and if you're lucky, you capture it." Their lives took very different turns. Suzi continued performing, writing, and exploring new sounds, while Chris settled into a quieter, family-oriented life. But both carried the memory of that duet, the one song that connected their names forever. Even decades later, when Suzi performs Stumblin' In live, she often dedicates it to Chris Norman, calling him a true gentleman and someone I'll always hold dear. In 2017, when Suzi was asked in an interview about which collaborations meant the most to her, she didn't hesitate to mention Chris Norman. "We had something you can't plan or practice," she said softly. It was real, and it's still there, in that song, every time you listen. Though fans still speculate about the true nature of their bond, Suzi has always handled the subject with grace. "People can believe what they want," she once remarked. "The truth is we had a beautiful connection, one that didn't need labels." Her words hinted at something deeper, but always stopped just short of confirming the romantic stories that followed them for decades. Now, as both artists reflect on long and successful careers, that one duet continues to echo. For Suzi Quatro, Stumblin' In remains more than just a hit. It's a memory of a time when two artists came together and created something pure, heartfelt, and unforgettable. For Chris Norman, it's a reminder of how music can unite souls, even if only for a brief, shining moment. And for fans, it's a love story, real or imagined, that will never fade. Now at 75, Suzi Quatro looks back on her extraordinary life and career with a mix of pride and emotion. She's still performing, still writing, and still proving that rock and roll doesn't have an expiration date. But when the topic of Chris Norman comes up, even after 4 decades, there's a certain softness in her voice. It's as if that part of her story still holds a special, untouched place in her heart. Recently, Suzi finally opened up more than ever before, reflecting on what that collaboration really meant to her and why she believes it still resonates so deeply with fans today. "When you have chemistry like that," she said in an interview, "it's not something you can create. It's something you're lucky enough to find. Chris and I never forced anything. It was pure, honest. It came from a place of respect and shared passion for music." For Suzi, Stumblin' In wasn't just a love song. It was an emotional snapshot of two artists connecting through authenticity. "We didn't need to pretend to be in love," she explained. "The music did it for us." Her words silenced years of speculation. There was no secret affair, no hidden romance, just two souls who found harmony at a time when everything aligned perfectly. But that doesn't mean the bond wasn't powerful. "You meet thousands of people in this business," Suzi admitted, "but very few truly touch your spirit." Chris did. Even now, Suzi often performs Stumblin' In her live shows, and every time she does, audiences can feel the nostalgia and emotion in her delivery. She smiles softly as she sings, sometimes closing her eyes, lost in the memory of that first recording session in 1978. Fans say that moment feels like time stopping, as if, for a few minutes, she's back in that studio with Chris, creating something eternal. Chris Norman, on the other hand, has also shared nothing but warmth when speaking about Suzi. "We had a wonderful time," he said. "There was never any pressure, never any ego, just two people enjoying the music." His humility mirrors Suzi's, both grateful for the magic they made together, without trying to define it beyond the music. As Suzi enters her twilight years, her reflections have become more honest and deeply emotional. "I've had an incredible career," she said, "but it's the moments like that duet, the ones that touch hearts, that stay with you forever." Fame fades, songs fade, but connections like that, they live on. Her confession reveals something deeper about the nature of artistry itself, that sometimes the most meaningful relationships in a musician's life aren't about romance, but about shared creative energy. Suzi's story with Chris Norman is proof of that. Two artists from completely different worlds came together by chance, and in doing so, created one of the most enduring love songs of all time. Today, Stumblin' In still plays on radios, still trends on nostalgic playlists, and still brings tears to the eyes of those who remember hearing it for the first time. It represents an era when music was simple, heartfelt, and genuine, much like the bond between Suzi and Chris. In one of her most touching statements, Suzi summarized it best. "People always ask if there was more between us. And I tell them, yes, there was. Not love the way you think, but love all the same. The kind that only music can create." At 75, Suzi Quatro stands as one of the last great rock icons of her generation. Her voice still carries power. Her words still hold truth. And her story with Chris Norman continues to remind the world that the most beautiful connections don't always need definition. Sometimes they're just meant to be, like two voices perfectly stumbling in. Together,